Kia ora koutou, ko Victoria McLennan Takawanua, but please call me Vic, and welcome to this Fireside chat. Really excited about this. It's going to be an interesting conversation, and I am the CEO of IT Professionals. I don't have my background on today because I'm not using my usual laptop, so you get to see my the wall of the room that I work in instead, and you'll be able to watch the sun as it disappears. I expect, but the turntable behind me, very important thing in my life, as many of you may have heard. I'm CEO of IT Professionals, and we are the industry peak body that is focused on people and their skills and talent and capability who work and want to work in the digital technology industry. And today it's really exciting because I'm joined by my two bosses, basically. Well, I don't really let them act like my bosses, to be frank, as you'll discover through the next 45 minutes. But I'm joined by the President of IT Professionals of the Society, who's Anthony Dowling, and the Deputy President, who's Jamie Vaughan. So kia ora and welcome to you both. It's awesome to have you here.
Thanks, Vic.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to it, actually. Hopefully we bring a bit of entertainment and value to everyone.
I hope so. Well, we're going to talk about careers, and I think it's really important. We're in the middle of the year from a university study time. We're in a really interesting economic time. It's been a tight skills market for a while, but we are all hearing that that's softening and people are getting laid off. So it's a good time to be talking about career development. And I think it's great to have you both here because you've both got long histories and interesting pathways that you've followed to get into the industry. So what I'll ask you to both do first, one at a time, is just give us kind of like 2 to 3 minutes on your potted history of how you came into the digital technology industry and how you got to where you are and what you're doing today. And Ants, would you like to go first?
I'd love to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go way, way back just for a starter because it might be relevant. You said 2 to 3 minutes. So just picture this, a 7-year-old writing their first computer program. I don't think you'd call it writing because the learning experience that this particular 7-year-old me got from it is that you need understanding and knowledge for something to work. What had happened at the time is as I was copying and pasting this code, typing it into a computer at the time, is it wasn't working. And what I didn't understand is when you take a code from a Commodore 64 book and put it into a VIC-20, it doesn't work. You run out of memory pretty quickly. I think that's kind of relevant to everyone that uses ChatGPT, just to expect that they're going to take all their jobs because you can copy and paste code or anything and it's going to work. So that's where I started as a 7-year-old, getting very frustrated in technology and stuff. But as a teenager, I continued to break things, and the family PC was something that would also get broken quite regularly because I had a penchant for reading the thick user manuals that used to come with everything. So you can imagine me going through the MS-DOS manual, and I would read it cover to cover, but then I would try out some of these commands and I would get halfway down the page and I'd be like, what does FDIS do? What does format do? And it turns out what they do is they enable your parents to come along in absolute disgust when you've hosed the family computer. So that's how I started my career learning stuff. But fortunately, reading manuals, my penchant for doing that, my neighbor had a big thick set of Turbo Pascal books. So I would read those and I'd teach myself Turbo Pascal, which was fantastic because that was really when I started to learn how to be a developer. So I went to Otago University, which was good because they were teaching us stuff there. But then because I was working part-time at the time as well, I didn't really like not having enough money. So I'd quit uni and go and work full-time. But the problem with that, I didn't really like that either because getting up and going to work at 9 a.m. in the morning, it's not as much fun as rolling into a lecture at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So I'd quit my job and then go back to varsity, continuing to work part-time. However, I was fortunate enough, I had an offer from a friend in Japan, got a role over there, was doing software development for a couple of years. But I kind of matured and grew up there and realized I know what I need my degree for now after spending however many longs not getting not getting it. So I didn't have the requirements for a visa to stay there. So the plan was come back to New Zealand, finish my degree and go back work overseas. But that didn't really work out because about a month after I came back to New Zealand, 9/11 happened and the world changed. And I figured, actually, I don't want to go back over the seas at the moment. So I stayed in New Zealand, finished my degree, did a master's in digital forensics, then continued to not use anything to do with either of those degrees. I set up my own business in software development and contracted to the same organization that I had been for many, many years prior. Ended in a 27-year contract, which only ended a couple of years ago. And as I was going to look for a new role, we realized I had shortcomings in my CV. So I think we'll cover more of that after. But yeah, that's how I went from that 7-year-old, those learnings that are still relevant today.
That's awesome. And for anyone who's watching this, we do have the Q&A function. You can write questions or comments. And Kay is a fan of hearing about first experiences. And she's saying that her son tried programming in BASIC as a 5.5-year-old. I'm really impressed to hear that. So thanks, Kay, for sharing. Right, Jamie, tell us a bit about your potted history.
My turn, is it? Righty-ho. Ia whakalawhalai atu kia matolo asi e kai hingo haku ko Jamie. So yes, I've been in IT for a good 20-odd years now, roughly, give or take. My first experience wasn't quite as storied as Ant's. I was actually a music student when I went to uni. I played the trumpet way back in the day. The problem, of course, with music is you kind of have to practice. I never really got the hang of that one properly, to be honest. But I fell in with the wrong crowd, essentially. I really did, and was influenced by a rough group of people who did comp sci. So they said, hey, come and do Comp 103. And I did, and it was awful. I hated it. I was not good at it at all. And so it wasn't my thing. But it did sort of wake up that whole, hey, that's a computer. That's pretty cool. Let's tinker with that. And I remember spending my first money from the government of StudyLink, the old, was it course-related costs, on a really basic machine, 256 meg of RAM. I don't think it was a Pentium. I think it was a Celeron from memory. It was the cheapest thing I could get. And fired it up. Jumped on the dial-up at the time, and immediately got a virus and had to rebuild it. So that was fun. So I, like Ants, I dropped out of university just because the whole getting a full-time job seemed like the best thing to do, and I ended up working at one of the large electronics retailers. You might describe them as hardly normal. And worked there for a few years, right as the big box stores were getting into home installations. So I was one of the first people in Dunedin to start getting into that, getting into people's homes from a big box store and installing their purchases. And that was kind of fun. I quite enjoyed that, getting out there and talking to different people. But it was home consumer level, no if buts or maybes about that. And from there, I ended up working for a consulting firm, an IT consulting firm, sort of a precursor to what you see in MSPs today, where I worked as a systems engineer and later a managed services engineer for a good 9 years. It was based in Christchurch, had a satellite Dunedin satellite office in Dunedin, and worked for a number of businesses around here in Dunedin for 9 years. And one such business said, hey, we've just lost our IT manager. Would you like to come in and take that role? And I thought, okay, well, 9 years, it's time for a change. And when I got there, I started taking up the Signal grad school. It was called the Improv Prac. What did they call it? The Extend program, I think they called it back in the day. So it was essentially a master's degree through the Polytech. They took one look at what I'd done in university, said, well, you've had nearly 3 years of university experience. That's evidence of prior learning. Come and do our master's program. So that's what I did. And that for me was a massive turning point. When I was working for the consulting firm, I was quite happy just to sit there, pot away and fix things and all that. Whereas the master's program really said, well, actually, you've got 9 years of experience here at the corporate level. You could use that to do more important things, bigger things, look at strategy, look at the technical side of things. You don't have to stay in operations. So for me, that was very much a turning point. And, for the next 5 years at that particular role as the IT manager, it was a lot of learning, a lot of progress. But ultimately, look, I worked in small and medium businesses my entire career. At the start of 2022, thinking back. The current role I'm in here at Port Otago came up, where essentially I'm out here, I look after the applications that make the containers go up and down and round and round and in and out and do the hokey tokey, all of that fun stuff. So I'm working here as an application specialist. So you're breaking out of that small to medium business into something quite a bit larger, much larger enterprise, and all of the fun challenges that come with it. So that's how I got to where I am, IT-wise anyway.
Jamie, thanks for sharing that. And I love that while you were talking, there was one of those container moving machines going past behind you. So we could actually see what you do live during this webinar. So that's really cool.
The funny thing about that, Vic, is that there's not many of the IT guys here are willing to go up those straddles. There's only 2 of us. And I think they're a blast. I think they're fun. They haven't let me drive one yet, though. I'm still working on that. So we'll see how that goes.
I think I told you I had a brief stint working for Port Wellington, and I wasn't prepared to go up. The height of some of those is incredible. But fantastic to watch. So it was great to hear that both of you returned to education and had different experiences with education later in life. And we'll explore education a little bit more later. But first of all, just to talk about some of those varied steps that you had in your careers, I'll go to you first, Jamie. Did you have any deliberate planning on how you wanted to get to where you are now? Did you ever go through that kind of planning visualization exercise?
Not at the start of my career, no. That's safe to say. I think, working as the consulting firm and all that, I think it was very much coasting. It's like, I've got a role, I'm doing some stuff, I'm quite comfortable where I am. Very low, I wouldn't say low responsibility. There's a fair bit of responsibility there, but I was able to go home and just switch off and not worry about it. So it was just comfort, I think, and that was it. It wasn't until I did the education later on. It's like, actually, I could do a lot more and contribute a lot more with the skills I've got and the knowledge I've got. So it wasn't until I started doing that study later on that it's like, okay, well, where could we go later on down the track? So
Oh, that's good to know. And what about you, Ants? Did you do any deliberate kind of visualization or planning of your career?
In the early stages, probably similar to Jamie, I didn't. I was very lucky that I kind of got shoulder tapped. But it was only when I ended up working overseas, like in my early to mid-20s, that I kind of matured and understood what my place was. And it was like, oh, okay, then I'll come back and do a degree. And it was only from that point forward, after a bit of real world experience, that I kind of realized, okay, let's start planning things. And the plan was complete a degree and go back overseas. And Jamie mentioned getting comfortable after I started my own business, which I did to learn businessy things like tax and payroll and things like that. I got comfortable and possibly bordering on being lazy. And I was just comfort. And then there was another, a second wave of motivation and enthusiasm. It's like, okay, we need to move forward. And that's where I'm at with my new role. It's like, oh, so it does come and go, but it's not necessarily having to plan out your entire career. It's about where you're at now and, short term, because where everyone might be in 5 years or 10 years time could be completely different.
And if we get time, we'll talk a little bit about setting expectations of yourself and expectations of your employer later on. But still talking about that career planning, many people assume that management is the only path to really advance your career into and is the way to earn more money. Certainly that's something I've heard from people over the years. But what about a technical pathway? Is it worth pursuing that as an alternative to a management pathway? And what's your experience there?
Absolutely. I think if you look at any of the salary reports in the last couple of years, that those technical pathways, the remuneration packages, they're just huge. They might be a little more tempered now, but compared to other industries, you don't have to go into management if money is all you're worried about. But those pathways also offer you, if you're interested in problem solving a bit more or, engaging with, people or creation, then that might be more of your forte than the management path. Absolutely beneficial. And that's where I ended up and really loved getting involved in that creation aspect.
How about you, Jamie? You've stayed closer to the technical side, haven't you?
I have, yeah, and that was one of the concerns I had coming into this role. Is like I was an IT manager, and now I'm going to a technical specialist role. What's the changes going to be? I think it's really important to remember that being a manager isn't the only form of leadership. Once you're a highly technical, in a team that is, a bunch of highly technical people, you will be the expert in what you're doing, and you are expected to lead. Even a manager, like, not everyone knows everything. It doesn't work that way. We can't all know everything. So you will still be expected to lead in your own way once you get to that sort of point where you're the expert. And that's certainly something worth aiming for. There's certainly value in that. There's certainly ways to earn a living that way. So no, being the overall manager of a team isn't necessarily the end goal, let's say, for a lot of people. Yeah.
So you've both talked about having further education, later in your careers, but I'm really interested in talking about continuous learning and development throughout your career and how important that is. And I've got a two-part question. I'll go to you first, Jamie. So how important do you see continuously learning throughout your career, as in learning on the job as well as formal education and other types of learning? And what types of learning would you recommend that people pursue?
I wouldn't say it's important. I'd say it's essential. For the roles that we have, especially in the IT industry, which is becoming far more pervasive on a day-to-day basis, the knowledge we need to carry on, even just to stay still where we are, we need to constantly upskill. I remember someone from the Polytech saying that our skills need to increase by a base level of 20% every year just for us to stay put where we are, which dubious figures as to where they got that from, but the point's made. So I think we need to constantly learn. It's not a question of if, it's a case of something we have to do just to continue working within this industry. In terms of what pathway you should be taking, look, it depends on the role. For me, going through the Polytech was fantastic because the things I deal with are quite abstract by definition. If you find value in your role by doing sort of technical qualifications or getting certificates from vendors, then you do that. You do what you feel you need to do. And you can take guidance from mentors. You can Google the heck out of it if you like, but you do what you find interesting. I think that's the way to go. And fit that into your what they call the framework of practice, how you operate every day.
I know a lot of employers think their staff sit there and Google everything they're doing every day. So interesting you mentioned that one. So Ants, what's your view on continuous development and the kinds of things people should be looking at?
Definitely in agreement with Jamie on that one. Like, I recall when I was doing my thesis for my master's, the amount of time that it took between start and finish, what I submitted in the end, most of it was out of date. That's how fast our industry was actually progressing. So it's really important that, we are continuously learning, because technology is just, it's rampant pace. But as for the types of learning, it's what you're trying to achieve. What's your end goal? If you're trying to get a goal, your type of learning that you might be getting into, if you want to get a job, might be a short-term thing. It might be like, I need to go and do a course that gives me hands-on experience. But it's also, you need the learning that's going to be relevant to what you're doing. Like, you could do your own training course or something like that, but you need to add pressure. Because in the real world, if you're doing any particular task, there's going to be a real world pressure. So if you need to put time constraints on things, whereas if you just meander along, I'm going to learn this watching a Google YouTube video or something like that, without any real pressure or constraints, you're not going to get the same value out of that. So, but if I was going to suggest a type of learning, a more generic, less technical thing would be engross yourself in communication skills and learning about that, how you can freely communicate with people or encourage people or even influence people. And there's plenty of courses on that you can get one-on-one tuition over the internet. COVID has been a great source of, learning and online learning availability from professionals. Like, I've spent multiple sessions with David J.P. Phillips on communication and things, and they're fantastic sessions that he runs. And it's like, you can get online with these people and have them be in the room with them And I think that value, that type of learning, that goes across all sorts of roles, not just technical, but management and stuff as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's really good insight. And the communication skills are just so important in our industry, aren't they? They're just front and centre, along with a whole lot of other soft skills that we need. I'm going to ask a slightly contentious question of you both next. In your experience, what should people expect in terms of support for their career development from their employers? I'll go to you, Jamie, first. What's your experience been of your employers?
It makes me think of an old story there where you've got two business owners talking and one says to the other, what if we invest all of this training in our people and they leave? And the response from the other one is to say, well, what if we don't invest in our employees and they stay? I think employers have a responsibility to invest in their people. If they want their businesses to succeed, there is a responsibility there. Now, within reason, of course. You don't want to say, well, I'm going to go do this course and it's going to cost 20 grand. Here's the bill, boss. That might not go down so well. But no, I do think that employers do have that responsibility. And I would actually go so far as to say, so contentious question, contentious answer. I would go so far as to say that if you're an employer who does not invest in your employees, you need to question whether or not your business model is viable. That's what I'd say.
Great point to raise. How about you, Anne? What's your experience there?
From a different point of view, it depends on the organisation that you're joining. And I've found it depends on the size of the organisation, if they have a culture that's intrinsic to ensuring that their staff are uplifted. They may already have pathways and internal programs in place, but you can find that out before you actually work for an organisation. In the interview stage, you can get that information out very early. It's like, is this a good culture fit for me? Will they be helping me develop my career? And if you don't find that out before accepting a role, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to earn your stripes, because if you've only been there for a couple of weeks and you turn up to your management and say, look, here's a course I want to go to, it's $4,000, good luck. I don't like your chances. Whereas if you've earned your stripes and you've shown a bit of value, if that organisation doesn't have that cultural uplifting sort of intrinsic value, that's when you have to sort of work for it to get there.
Yeah, they're really good points there. And, as an employer, I know that I certainly probably have a bias to reward people who spend more of their own time learning, and then I will also invest in them supplementing that learning because I can see that they're investing in themselves. And I think that's really important, that you're investing your own time as well and not just expecting your employer to facilitate all of your learning, which kind of leads to a discussion about expectations. One of the things that I'm often asked by people is, how long is it going to take me when they decide they're going to pivot from being a business analyst to a cybersecurity analyst, or from, in this modern world, we have chat GPT analysts now. If you decided you wanted to pivot from being an applications analyst to a chat GPT analyst, or from a tester to some other fabulous new role that we haven't even thought of today, but will pop up in 6 months' time. And people often ask me about how long will it take, and that's a really difficult question to answer. So if someone's investing in reskilling and upskilling, and both of you have had pivots in your career, have you got a little bit of a guide or a gauge that you think people should be investing time-wise in the skills they want for the future versus the skills they need for the here and now? I know that's a difficult question to answer, but I will go to you first, Ants, on that one.
Thanks for that tricky one. If we look at it from the point of view, if I want to pivot and go into a new role, I think it depends on a couple of things. But one of the important things is my runway, being how long can I handle being unemployed for, versus how long can I handle staying in my existing role if I don't like it. And if I was to pivot into cybersecurity or something like that, I can go through job adverts and I can look at all the certifications, like they prescribe exactly what they're looking for. And then I can go and find out how long it takes to do those courses or whatever. And then that's just going to give you a baseline. all right, that's going to put a tick box on your CV. But then real world experience with that, you're probably looking at 6 or 9 months just to have a good understanding of how things work. And then until you're able to actually provide a level of value to the organization, it could be, depending on the complexity of what you're working on, even further. I know in my current role, I've been here for 18 months, and it certainly took me 9 months just to understand the organization before I felt I was able to provide some real value. And 18 months later, I'm still learning more and more and more. So it does depend.
Yeah, it is a really interesting thing, the context of the role that you perform, but the context of the organisation that you're in and the way they do things around here and their data and processes are really challenging to learn, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Have you got anything to add to that, Jamie, from your experience?
Actually, my experience is very similar to Ant's. I've been here for just about 18 months, and I feel like I'm only just sort of getting my feet under the table really in the last 6 or so. But having said that, transport logistics is quite complex. There's no training manual for what I do. So unfortunately, when it comes to how long it's going to take, it really is a how long's a piece of string question. It's going to depend on the role, on the complexity, on the support given, on the resources available to upskill. So yeah, it is a really tough one to answer. But I'd say when you're moving to something completely new, you do need to give yourself that time. You can't be stressed out of your mind while you're doing it. You're not going to be very successful in that case. So take your time and get it right first time around. Pick up some mentors if you can, and take up any opportunity you can to learn. And that's probably the key phrase that I keep in my head. You either earn or learn, preferably both. If you're doing neither, get out of there. That's what it comes down to. So.
Fair enough too. Right, it's 5:00 and we've got 2 more topics we're gonna cover, which are mentoring and then job hunting. And I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat and we'll capture those and cover those as well. And good to see someone's just posted one. So we'll get to that shortly after our next 2 discussions. So mentoring, you just mentioned, Jamie, and let's talk about that next. It's a really important tool in career development. Can you tell us what the 3 best things about having a mentor are?
Yeah, sure. In my experience, it's one, you're learning from the experience of others. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, 2, you've got hopefully judgment-free support from someone who has a bit of experience. And, there's the number 3 course is that perspective, that little dose of reality that someone who's been around for a few years has, that, as someone getting into the industry or whatever it may be, you might not have yourself yet. So again, just getting that bit of perspective, that bit of reality that you might not quite be aware of yet.
Good answer. And Ants, you've had a mentor before. What would your top 3 be?
I would go with what Jamie said, but I'll add one more thing. I think one of the other great things about getting a mentor is that building that lasting bond, because you have that trust relationship between you and your mentor. And as you progress through your career and you move from one mentor to the other, because you will outgrow your mentors and you will need you'll have different needs from different people as your career progresses, but it's that bond. And if you're able and fortunate enough to build a strong bond with your mentor, they will be with you throughout your career and they will offer that different perspective that you learned earlier on. And also you'll get their continued learnings that they have and experiences as well.
And you've also been a mentor, and so putting that hat on, what's one piece of advice you would give to anyone who's looking for a mentor to ensure they gain the best possible experience from that relationship?
I would say be honest and listen. You got to be honest straight up. So the mentor and the mentee, you can figure out if the relationship's going to work. Because you can spend a lot of time going back and forth and it may not click with you, whether you're the mentee or the mentor. It really needs to ensure that you both click and have a really good understanding of each other. And you also need to listen to what the mentor's saying. You need to learn from their experiences and their perspective. Because if they tell you to engage and do something and you decide, no, I'm not going to do that, you're not going to get the value. So I would recommend you listen to them, put yourself in their shoes and say, if I was that mentor, why are they telling me this? And just role play it like that so you can get an idea of their perspective.
Have either of you, I'm going a little bit off script, but have either of you had a bad match with a mentor, like had someone that just hasn't clicked with you or needed to, just that relationship hasn't lasted very long at all?
I haven't had a bad one, but I've certainly had better ones than other ones.
Right.
But definitely no bad interactions or anything like that. Very lucky. But I know other people, they have had challenges in that regard.
How about you, Jamie?
Yeah, likewise, not anything bad. I think the mentor and the mentees I've gotten along pretty well. Maybe one instance where it might be that I might not quite be the right person to sort of offer specific guidance for their career, but can offer general guidance that might still be useful. I think the worst instance for me was someone I interviewed as like, hey, you could be my mentor, and I took the advice a little too literally, and it caused a little bit of confusion in one of my previous employers. But it was fine. We got there, but you've got to take these things with a grain of salt sometimes as well, and apply that guidance to your own style of working. But no, nothing bad, I would say.
So we've got a couple of questions about mentoring. One of them is, does ITP have a mentor program? And if so, how do we access it? The answer to that question is yes. If you're an ITP member, we have a mentor program, and we have lots of mentors who are ready, willing to take on mentees, and they range from people who might be a couple of years ahead of you in your career through to people who are quite senior and experienced. We can match you with someone who is on your specific trajectory or pathway. So if you're a tester, match you with someone who's in the same career, or if you've got a trajectory where you want to be a CTO or a CDO or a CIO, we also have people who are available to mentor you as you develop into those kind of roles. How do you access it? Unfortunately, you go to our terrible website, and a new website is coming soon, I promise everyone. And you'll find just in the menu system, you'll find mentoring, and click on that. And there's a little form that you need to fill in. And then Chrissy from our team will contact you and match you up with a person who will best suit your needs. If you're not an ITP member, I guess that's the other question is, how do you find a mentor if you're not an ITP member? And I would obviously say become an ITP member. Do either of you, Jamie or Ants, have some advice on finding a mentor when you're not an ITP member?
Sometimes larger organizations, they will have an internal mentoring program, like very large organizations. But otherwise, get involved with your local IT community, and you may not have to go through an official mentoring program as such. Just communicate with people, and you might meet someone and just say, hey, would you mind entering in a mentoring relationship with me? But yeah, you need to engage with people and get involved with your community.
Yeah, 100% agree with Ants there. That's how I got my first mentor when I was doing my master's. Was the IT manager of another firm in Dunedin that I met up with during a networking event. And said, hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to be a mentor? Yep, sweet as. And I still talk to this person on a regular basis and have a very strong working relationship with. So look, it's all good. Just do some networking, get out there, meet some people, say hi, and if you do that, then something will pop up.
I think the other thing too is, because I'm often asked by people to be their mentor and I don't have the capacity, is I will always introduce them to someone else. So if you do get up the courage to ask someone and they don't have capacity, don't be demanding of them, but ask them if they can introduce you to someone else, because they will probably know other people in their network who might be more available for you. The good thing about the ITP system is the people who have opted in to be mentors are acknowledging that they've got capacity and they're able to fulfill that function. Now, Harry's asked a question about, does ITP offer student members with mentoring programs? So we haven't to date, but our plan for the latter half of this year is to start mentoring circles for students so that we can bring a small group of students together with a with a technical mentor or a leadership mentor or whatever kind of thing they're wanting a mentor in, so that you'll have access to good mentors in the ITP network. So that is coming soon. So watch the space, Harry. So ask a question on the Student Slack channel about that, and Vic, the other Vic, will answer you on that one. Now, we're getting into the last part of our discussion, which is going to be about job hunting. We've got a question before I get into my questions. We've got a question here in the Q&A from an attendee who's asking, any advice for a qualified developer who took a work break and is looking to get a new job but can only work part-time? And that's a great question. Will I throw that to you first, Jamie, and see what your advice would be?
So I guess my general rule when it comes to job hunting, is as much as I haven't really done a heck of a lot of it in my career, but the general rule for me is the 60% rule. If you match 60% of the qualities in the job description, you chuck your name forward. And eventually it just becomes a numbers game, really, doesn't it? So you keep an eye out for the opportunities. 60% of it, yep, sweet as, that's me, in goes my CV, and you let the hiring party take a look and do their thing and see what happens. So that's one part of it. It does sound like a trickier one there, someone who's taken a break then coming back. I know when my wife was returning to the job market after being away after having children, it was tricky, and it was essentially that numbers game of just keep plugging away until something came up, and eventually something came up. So that's probably a big part of what I'd suggest we do there. In terms of just job hunting in general. Oh, sorry. Yep.
I was going to say, do you think there's a geographical element to that there's less part-time jobs potentially in some regions than there are in the big cities?
I think generally by nature there probably will be, yeah. But having said that, COVID's shaken things up a wee bit. So, you're seeing roles being advertised as remote, and is that going to be sustainable long term? I mean, it certainly looks like it will be. Who's to say? But I think there is certainly, if you want to go into an office and work, I think there will be some challenges there. Certainly for Ants and myself, who have had, at least in the past, their eyes on sort of the CIO, CTO roles. We do have to face the reality that in Dunedin it's going to be very limited, and one day if we want to go down that path, we're going to have to move. And look, that's just the nature of the job market, really. It's just reality for us. So one day, Vic, you might see us in office beside you. We'll see what happens. But I think there is some geographical challenges there as well.
Thanks for that. And Ants, any advice around looking for a new part-time job after a work break?
I think you're lucky. You're in a good time to be doing it, because COVID has shaken things up, and a lot of organizations, they are offering remote work. Some are going the other way, wanting everyone back in the office, but you don't just have to be looking within New Zealand now. My team is based all around the world. I wait for Hong Kong to get up at 12:30 in the afternoon, Bangalore at 4:30 in the afternoon. So you're not restricted to working within the time zone of New Zealand. Depends on your personal circumstances, of course, but in regards to having a break beforehand, just have a look at the prescriptions in the job adverts and just compare where your current skill set is. If you need to touch up on things, then that's fine. But a lot of previous experience will be transferable, but syntax or something might be different or something, but you will have knowledge that is transferable.
And that's sometimes challenging with some employers, right? Particularly with an HR person who's got a cookie cutter thing in front of them that says, we need an AWS certified blah, 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 blah. And you come along with your great CV and you've got fantastic other cloud experience, and trying to convince that HR person that you can meet that requirement. And that can be quite challenging, and I understand how challenging that is. But I think, to your point, Ants, looking at your skills and capability against what they're looking for and being really clear on that when you apply for the role will get you quite a long way. Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask ask you both my last couple of questions on job hunting, or possibly even the last one, because we've only really got a minute left. So it's been a tight labour market for a while, but things seem to be changing, as I said at the outset. And we'll also have students on here who, in the latter half of this year will be graduating, or maybe even mid-year graduating, and will be looking for their first full-time substantive role in the industry. Jamie, I'll go to you first. What are your top 3 pieces of advice for anyone who is on the job hunt?
There we go. I just touched on one of them. So I can say 60% rule. If you hit 60% of that job description, you chuck your CV in. So it doesn't matter. Just get it in there, because again, you can't win it if you're not in it. The second role that I'd suggest is do some research on the potential role. So look up who the company is, what they do, get a good solid understanding of sort of what they're about before you go in there. And just showing that little bit of knowledge, I promise you, will be very impressive to the people that are interviewing you. So you get a little bit of knowledge under your belt about who it is you're talking to. And the third one, possibly the most important, is just remember you're interviewing them as well. And I think Ans has already mentioned this earlier as well, that you're looking for it. You're saying, look, is this a good fit for me? And don't be afraid to ask those tough questions. If you feel like there's something that's not quite clear, don't be afraid to ask. And if anything, I think it'll make you stick out more in interviews. So just remember the interview goes both ways.
Excellent advice. How about you, Ants? What's your top 3?
Be patient. It can be a very time-consuming process. If you're lucky and end up going through a process with an organisation, you might end up in multiple interviews or multiple tests. It could be a multi-month process. It could be a long period of time till they respond, even to say, we've got your application, or even worse, here's a rejection letter. But that leads into the second one. You need to be resilient. You need to get out applications everywhere. And with that, you are going to need to be prepared for rejection. People are looking for specific things. And if there's hundreds of people applying for the same role you are, they might be slightly better or whatever. So if you're an unsuccessful candidate early on, it might be easy to get over. But if you've gone through, invested in the process, it could be harder to get over that. So be resilient, but because there will be more opportunities. And probably lastly is be realistic. Don't think that if you're, say, under that 60% that Jamie's talking about, that you're going to go into a role and demand, 170K if you don't meet your expectations. Just be realistic of, if you don't quite match anything and they've got a salary range that they've advised you, you're not going to be at the top end unless you have other external, transferable skills that, take you beyond what they're necessarily asking for. But one bonus thing is test yourself, get multiple people to do your proofreading. And if you're not good at interviewing, practice. It can be weird, but practice. And as Jamie mentioned, get to know as much about the role as you can.
And that practice is something I'm keen that we as ITP offer, because we have people within our membership who interview people on a regular basis who can potentially provide that kind of practice support. So I'm keen to get that off the ground. Nathan's made a really good point. Don't be afraid to cold contact companies that you like the look of. Over the years, I've employed a few people who have been cold contacts who have written me very well-formed, well-researched, to Jamie's point, well-understood emails describing how they can add value to my company, and I have moved on to employ them. I'm not advocating stalk people. I've also had people over the years stalk me and send me lots and lots of different messages on different medias and mediums, and that's not good. But a well-constructed, well-thought-out, direct contact can pay dividends. So I want to thank you both so much for your time today. That was great discussion, really great insights. And thank everyone who's here and listening to this, and thank those who posed the questions as well. We will get this video turned around and it'll be available online so you can watch it again or share it with your colleagues. And I'll be back for another fireside chat next week on whether our legal system is up to the task of new generative AIs and other types of emerging technologies. And to anonymous attendee who just said many thanks for the advice. I hope everyone got something out of this evening. Ka kite anō.